thank you to our bronze sponsor, Prowler. Sponsors make the conference possible. They allow to keep the ticket costs low, so thank you for that. The next talk is the file that contained the keys has been removed, an analysis of secret leaks in cloud buckets and responsible disclosure outcomes from Soufian El Yadmani. Soufian is a PhD candidate at the University of Leiden and CEO and co-founder of Modat. Welcome, Soufian.
Thanks, Christophe. Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about one of the researches we just did a few months ago, which is about secret leaks in cloud buckets. And then we did responsible disclosure, and we measured how organizations reacted to us and to the secret leaks. So this works. A little bit about me. So like Christophe mentioned, I'm founder and CEO of Modat, a Dutch startup based in The Hague. And I'm also a PhD candidate at Leiden University working on threat attributions in hacking automation, and also volunteering as the head of research at CSearch Global, which also I'll elaborate a little bit more about it in the next few slides. This is a research paper, so you can find it online if you want to read more about the research itself. It's very lengthy, so you can read more on the paper and what we did and how we did the whole research. It was a collaboration between Modat, Leiden University, and TU Delft, just for your information. So to start, I'll start with a little bit of introduction. Of course, we all hear about cloud buckets. Always in the news, someone have forgot about a bucket, and then other attackers have either got access to some data or were able to compromise some systems or getting access to some PII information, PHI information, and even sometimes being able to encrypt data in these buckets. However, we haven't seen a lot of research when it comes to how to use these buckets to actually do some lateral movements or privilege escalation in the cloud or getting access to third-party risks. The most recent researches that we found were actually after we published our paper. One of them was from Unit 42, where basically they found that some threat actors are actually targeting this S3 bucket in AWS and then using them to gain more access from secret leaks in those buckets to access extra systems in the cloud from these organizations. And of course, there is more research that was also shared in the last few months from Arctic, and also we saw more research also coming from other parties, where basically this one, I think it was a few months ago, where basically Unit 42 again talked about how the Shiny Hunters ransomware attack also used the same technique to compromise cloud infrastructures and attack those owners. Again, always the same problem. Buckets, secret leaks are not really analyzed, so that's why we decided, okay, we will basically investigate in cloud buckets. So we picked 4 cloud providers: DigitalOcean, AWS, GCP, and Azure Blobs as well. So we investigated the 4 of them. We investigated secret leaks in these providers and tried to figure out what we can do with these buckets, and of course, how they're going to react to our responsible disclosure. So our methodology relied on 2 sources. One of them is Grey Hat, and I'm sure you guys heard of Grey Hat, where basically they map any bucket that might be exposed to the internet. From our communications with them, they mentioned that they basically scrape the internet, including not just Google, but also GitHub, GitLab, all these kind of sources that might be exposed, and then they try to list the content and index it according to what they claim. And of course, in their platform, you can see a little bit more about the data. You can search in it for all kind of for all kind of files. The other source that we use is our own data, which is Modat is having a search engine for internet-connected devices. So basically, we map the internet on a daily basis from IP level. So we use the same data to collect the information about buckets and use it in our research. And of course, the methodology was pretty simple. So we collected the data. We looked for specific file types that I'm going to show you in a bit that are mainly used by DevOps and developers to store credentials. And then we deduplicate that data, try to analyze those credentials and see if they are valid credentials, not just some honey tokens. And then later on, we basically did the responsible disclosure and monitor what happens after that with these organizations that we reported the secret leaks to them. The list of files that we targeted are quite simple, so we went for very simple ones like PowerShell scripts, YAML file, JSON files, config files, bat files, Python as well, because of course people still sometimes host credentials in those. And we analyzed those, and eventually we were able to find a lot of credentials, as I might show you in a bit. So the amount of data we analyzed, so if you see that the last one from the 19th of January 2024, that's the amount of data. So we analyzed around 500,000 buckets, or 500,000 buckets from the 4 providers. And of course, AWS is still leading with a lot of buckets that are exposed to the internet, some of them on purpose, some of them are not. So that's the amount of bucket we had to analyze for these specific files. And then we started targeting the file types that we are interested in. So we didn't just look for all kinds of files, and I'm sure you guys can come up with other files that you might think, oh, they might be containing secrets. So we only targeted these ones. Of course, it's a scientific paper, so we had to focus on specific list of files. And these are the amounts of files that you can see per bucket and also per provider. So there are a lot of them, and also sometimes duplicated for many reasons. If we look at these files, we can see that some of them go back to a very long time ago. If we see that the last time they were modified, some of them have been modified last time in 2007. You might think, okay, then it's probably just some legacy bucket that nobody cares about. However, we were able to prove that those are still of interest to actually their owners, as I'm going to show in a bit. So we try to validate these credentials. So of course, you find the credentials using regexes. You cannot basically judge if they are valid or not. So we focused on trying to validate them basically by just seeing if they work. And then during the responsible disclosure process, if the owners ask for more details or prove that they actually work, then we take it a step further with them to tell them a little bit more information or use them in a way that they can judge or accept. So here you can see that we found around 215, and we reported 160. And the reason is that we were unable to actually figure out the owners of the other ones. So that was a little bit tricky. And of course, we reported them to the cloud providers we analyzed. Unfortunately, they weren't too much of help, but yeah, it's not their responsibility according to what they said. Responsible disclosure. I think we all agree that responsible disclosure is a big mess. We had to deal with all of these organizations at once, and we had to report to them all these credentials and talk to them separately. So we came up with a process, and the process was quite simple. So we came up with the format of an email, and then we documented the whole process, and we worked with CSIRS Global, which is a Dutch non-profit organization that basically hunts for vulnerabilities and 0 days into the wild internet, and then report them to either vendors or their owners, and that's what we came up with together. And the reporting process was pretty simple. So an email would look like this, where basically we just tell them a little bit more about what we did, how we did it, send them a proof of that the tokens are valid, and the link where the file is exposed, and then help them throughout the process if they ask for more details afterwards. So when we look at the data that we shared with them and how many have been fixed, only 60, I mean, we were happy with 60% that actually have been fixed, but 40% of the reported ones were not fixed, or at least during the research period, they were not fixed. For many reasons, we don't know if the owners are still using them, or they basically are legacy systems that they don't care about. But at least 60% of them, they fixed the issue. Some of them went back and sent an email back about all the details of what they did and how they did it. And some of them, basically, they fixed them silently and moved on. If we look at the secrets that we found, of course, AWS tokens are on the lead. And followed by GCP, but then we found other stuff. Slack tokens, Stripe tokens, passwords and usernames and passwords, and of course, other credentials to Dropbox or some GitHub CI/CD or all kind of credentials were there. And those are the ones just that we were able to analyze in the research period we had. When it comes to how they are spread worldwide according to their owners, of course, the US was #1, but there are more countries that were basically also impacted by that. So it's a worldwide problem. It's not really linked to a specific region or specific country. And the same goes for industries. So we found these credentials in ministries, in hospitals, but also in police departments in some countries, and also IT companies, very big banks worldwide as well. So the problem is there, and we all know the problem, but it's actually not just impacting SMEs or non-mature organizations, but we also found this in very big banks, actually worldwide. Going back to my point regarding the old buckets or the old leaks, you can see here how many have been found and the last time they were modified, and you can see which ones have been fixed. So you can see that there are leaks that goes back to 2015, but they were still fixed by their owners. That means they are still of interest to them, and they were active on basically fixing these problems by taking down these credentials. Taking down the credentials doesn't mean that they just revoked credentials, but some of them revoked the whole bucket. Some of them basically deleted the file. So they had very different ways of dealing with this. If we share a little bit more about how they reacted, so many of them, they were really fast, like 1 or 2 days, and they were already like taking down the systems. As I mentioned earlier, we basically monitored every credentials we found. We monitored every file that contained the credentials in the bucket and to see if they were still up and running, if they are still valid. Most of them reacted in the first 2 days, and then it became a bit silent. And then after 7 days, we started seeing people picking up more and more, from like 7 days to 30 days, where people basically started fixing also more of these credentials. Here's the tricky part. So we monitored 3 levels, like I mentioned. Either the bucket is, they closed the bucket, they deleted the file, or revoked the file. If we look here, only 19 of them actually did the 3 measurements. So they revoked credentials, they basically restricted the file, and they also deleted the bucket or made it inaccessible. If we look here, we see that some people restricted the file. They didn't restrict the bucket, could be because it's supposed to be public. However, they didn't revoke the tokens. So the token's still valid. So if you had access already to these tokens, then you can still use them, even if they just deleted the file. And of course, 6 of them just restricted the file and restricted the bucket, but they didn't revoke the tokens. I'm not sure if they just missed that information or they just forgot about it, but that's the pattern we saw. So we had to be a bit more active again and tell them, okay, you need to revoke the credentials. If someone already had access to that, then yeah, they still can use them. If we show you a little bit of some reactions we got, so this one, basically, they said, we have been doing some maintenance, so we think that's the reason that the bucket and the credentials are exposed. We had others that basically said, or at least this is my favorite, because they asked the right questions. They asked, when did we access those, how, what kind of IPs we used, and they kept us posted, but they also gave a bug bounty, which is cool. And then, of course, you have this type. They CC'd around 30 people. And of course, they blamed someone. If you see here, they were like, oh, it was someone that had been working for us for 2 years. They left the company 2 years ago, but why the credentials are still valid? So that was a bit of an interesting use case for us. If we come to some use cases, so we reported one of the use cases, as I might show here. I'm really struggling with this. So here you see that it's very blunt, like, hey, the file has been deleted. I think, well, thanks. However, while monitoring, we saw that the file appeared again. And that means, I think, because they had some scheduled tasks where basically the file appeared again with new credentials. So we basically can just wait for them to just delete the file, and then some cron job or something on the back end basically will create the file again with the credentials. In some use cases, people are sharing passwords and prod passwords in Slack. So we had tokens to Slack, and we reported, and they say, OK, what can you do with this? And literally, just first query, the first channel we picked, we found credentials to a prod environment that they are basically sharing. We got access to Falcon API from CrowdStrike. So we basically were able to control all the measurements and security in CrowdStrike. So we had basically access to everything, and that's how we actually knew the organization name, because you can see the email of the person that last modified these rules in CrowdStrike. So that's how we used it to actually basically send them the information and report the vulnerabilities. You can see like what system, which location, what kind of measurements they are using, etc. Yeah, in some cases, we just got the tokens, and then with the tokens, we got access to 230 other buckets. And you can see all type of backups, really interesting stuff, and more, and more. Yeah, just a lot of backup files in a lot of systems. In some other cases, we just basically had the scripts that they basically have the credentials, but they also contains admin credentials. If you look a little bit down, you can see that they are basically having the admin credential hard-coded in the script. And last, we got access to service accounts from GCP, of course. So we were also able to use that to actually impersonate another account and basically have more privileges in the cloud. To finish my presentation, I think we all know that the buckets are always a problem, have always been a problem. Secret leaks in the buckets, I've never seen someone investigating that, so that's why we decided, OK, we will try and figure out that. And I'm sure we have missed a lot of other config files that might be used to actually do a little bit more harm. We always talk about credentials in GitHub or being used from GitHub or third parties in the cloud, but we haven't investigated in the buckets themselves. That's why we decided to do that. I think one of the biggest problems that we noticed during this research is that there's always this problem between the bucket permissions, the policies, the ACLs. It's always like a mess. So one of them is overwriting the other one, and that causes a lot of problem. Which led us to actually do another research from another perspective. But at least we see that there are GCP, for example, and AWS just a few months ago announced that they will be more proactive when it comes to these buckets. If there are like buckets that are publicly accessible, they will be taking them down themselves. And I think GCP, for example, is able to do that already unless you disable that feature. Well, what's next? Well, we decided, OK, we can use the same trick, but this time to get to access to source code. So we use the fact that there are buckets, they are writable, and there is source code. And this source code is either used in third parties or because the websites are being hosted on these buckets. And we were able to actually find a lot more actually during this research. It's still not public, but if you are interested and want to read the paper, please reach out to me. Otherwise, that's all for me. And please leave your feedback, questions, or you are interested in collaborating for research. I'll be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Soufian. Any question in the room? We have a few on Slack. But...
Hi, great talk. One question, how good is the quality of the contact data? So did you use the imprint on websites, or how did you get the names of companies owning this part?
We use the fact that these files usually contain some sort of information. So sometimes we found, for example, the developer who was working on this kind of files. In the CrowdStrike example, we just found the email. And then there were two types of emails, one for CrowdStrike, which apparently is an analyst, and the other one is the organization. So we used also the fact that we got access to this system to communicate with them. That's why you see that we found 217 leaks, but we only report 160 because the other ones, we really couldn't link them back to any kind of organizations.
Awesome talk. Quick question, because you talked a bit about obviously having certain cases and responses where people were not necessarily kind of immediately too focused on the thing or like focusing on damage control or kind of blaming somebody. Were there any instances of kind of companies coming back and just kind of denying your findings outright or just stating that, oh no, you're wrong, we're not vulnerable, what do you mean?
We had an interesting use case. So we have the SMTP, AWS SMTP access credentials, and their security team reached back and they were like, you cannot do anything with this. So we sent them an email from that security email. So that worked well for us.
Perhaps I missed it, but we have a talk prior to that regarding honey tokens. So how many tokens did you find, or were there some parts where you identified that there are honey tokens?
Well, as long as these organizations reported back to us, we thought, okay, these probably are valid, and also the data that you can still access. I'm assuming that the ones we couldn't link back to any organizations might be honey tokens. I actually have been thinking about it since the talk.
One question from the Slack is, did you have some organizations that threatened legal action?
Sorry?
Did you have any org that threatened to take legal action?
No. They were all friendly. We had some organizations who really reacted very fast, but they never told us anything. So they just fixed the problem and then they moved on. So with our monitoring, we were able to see, oh, they just in a few hours already took down the buckets, but none of them actually was threatening us, no.
I think we have a bit more time for questions, so I'll take one from Slack. There's a question which is, what cloud provider's contact regarding a disclosure was the best or most helpful from your experience?
None. So we reported to all of them. So we reported to the security teams. I think we only got a response from AWS, and they said, that's not our problem. So I do understand that. Sorry, AWS people. But I know they said, OK, it's their owner's issue, so we cannot do much about that. That's basically for the part where we weren't able to link the bucket to a specific organization.
As a follow-up question, AWS is known to set some restrictive policies on leaked access keys.
Sorry, come again?
AWS is known to set some restrictive policies on leaked access keys. So if you wanted them to take action, you could just publish them on GitHub, I guess.
Well, then I will get the legal team hunting me now.
One last question. Maybe one last from me. If people want to see your papers on that, what's the best way for them to access it?
The first one, you can basically find it online. You can just use the same name as the presentation. You will find it accessible. However, the second one is still under review in one of the conferences, so we haven't published it yet. I'll be happy to share it in one conversation. I'm on the Slack channels of the CloudSec, so you can just reach out and I'll be able to share it.
Thank you. The next talk is at 4:15, so stay.
Thank you.
Thank you.